Okay, picture this. You're cleaning out a drawer, just going through some old stuff, and you come across this glowing vintage photo of yourself from exactly 5 years ago. For a few seconds, the memory makes you smile, but then this other thought quietly slips in. You stare at that photo and you realize you didn't just lose 5 years. Did you live the same year 5 times? It's a pretty stark question, right? And honestly, it kind of hits a nerve. The exact same worries, the same fears, the same postponed promises of, oh, I'll definitely start next week. It's a really uncomfortable realization because time kept moving, but on the inside, it feels like very little has actually changed. Well, the good news here, there is a massive difference between looking backward and looking forward. You literally cannot rewrite the last 5 years, but the next five, they haven't even happened yet. So today, in this explainer, we're going to unpack 6 specific psychological habits that will empower you to actively rewrite what your next 5 years become. All right, let's jump right into that with habit 1, small experiments. Normally our brain acts kind of like a highly dramatic sports commentator. It absolutely loves making these huge, catastrophic predictions fueled entirely by imagination and anxiety before the game even starts. It's up there shouting things like, there is zero chance you'll win, or you've already lost. It's exactly like a person standing completely frozen at the edge of a swimming pool, calculating over and over in their head if the water is too cold, and eventually just going home without ever dipping a toe in to find out. Instead, what we really need to do is run small experiments. This is all about action and evidence. Just test the waters. Instead of convincing yourself that absolutely nobody will talk to you at a networking event, run a small experiment. Walk up and start just one conversation. Real, tangible evidence always beats internal motivational speeches, and it very quickly proves that your anxiety was just making up fictional stories. Which leads us perfectly into habit 2, hold on to positive memories. See, if I asked you right now to remember a random criticism someone made about you 10 years ago, you'd probably pull it up instantly, right? But a compliment from that exact same time, much, much harder to dig up. Our human survival system naturally fixates on threats to keep us safe. But in the modern world, this ancient system drastically distorts our reality. Our brain essentially operates like a 24/7 news channel that runs 90% breaking bad news and only 10% good news. It is quite literally like watching a beautiful 2-hour movie and only remembering the 2 saddest scenes while completely ignoring all the joy. Now, psychology doesn't ask us to just blindly ignore our real problems, but it definitely challenges us to balance the scales. So I want you to start asking yourself every single day, what went well today? Challenge yourself to consciously collect evidence that you're actually growing. Now, even when we do collect those good moments, some heavier feelings are still going to try to take over. And that brings us to habit 3, treat emotions like visitors. I want you to try thinking of your emotions as unexpected guests. They knock on the front door, they come inside, they make a little bit of a mess in the living room, but eventually, sooner or later, they always leave. The big problem is that we tend to treat these visitors as if they hold the deed to the house. You really need to treat your emotions like visitors, not bosses. Anxiety might show up and declare, don't go out today, or sadness might whisper, just stay in bed. But those emotions, they're just messages. They are absolutely not bosses demanding to take the steering wheel of your life. Think of it like driving your car through a sudden rainstorm. Sure, the rain changes the road conditions, you have to adjust, but it absolutely does not change your final destination. You can feel totally anxious and still step out the front door. Now let's take a quick pause here because I have to ask, why do these kinds of habits usually fail after just a week? I mean, we've all been there for sure. We get super inspired, we dive into a brand new routine, and then, well, real life just kind of gets in the way. Knowing what to do has rarely been the actual problem for any of us. The real beast of a challenge is keeping it going. But I promise you, at the very end of this explainer, I am going to reveal the ultimate secret to keeping these habits alive long, long after your initial burst of motivation fades away. It's really the key to the whole shebang, so stick with me here. But before we unlock that little secret, we've got to cover habit 4. Pay attention to what matters. See, there's this silent thief in our lives that steals away our potential by making us confuse what is buzzing and urgent with what is truly deeply meaningful. Every single day, we face a choice between the urgent, the ringing phone, the endless texts, constantly putting out tiny fires at work, and the important, like reading a good book, taking care of your health, or calling an old friend. Imagine you have 2 houseplants. You water the urgent one every single day without fail, and the important one, well, it only gets watered if you happen to have a few minutes left over at the end of the week. Which one of those is going to thrive? There is a very simple psychological principle at play right here. Whatever you give your attention to grows. And speaking of what grows in our minds, let's look at habit 5. Look for a second explanation. Imagine this, because it's a super relatable scenario. Your phone rings, you pick it up, and your friend on the other end just sounds a little distant, maybe a little cold. Instantly, our minds transform into award-winning, catastrophic drama writers. Just notice how incredibly fast this catastrophe timeline progresses. The phone rings, they sound distant, and bam, instantly you convince yourself you did something wrong. Before you even hang up the phone, you're 100% certain they hate you. Why? Because our brains completely despise unanswered questions. When there is missing information, they absolutely rush in to fill the blanks, and they almost always choose the most negative assumption possible. So the crucial point here is actively searching for a second explanation. What else could explain this situation? Well, maybe they're just exhausted. Maybe they're stressed out about work, coming down with a cold, or simply running late to catch a train. Actively asking yourself, what else could explain this, builds incredible cognitive flexibility. It stops us dead in our tracks from wasting precious mental energy worrying about things that literally were never true in the first place. And that builds perfectly into our final habit. Habit 6, curiosity over certainty. This is the habit that quietly ties everything else we've talked about together. Honestly, if you want to know the absolute greatest secret to keeping your mind young, regardless of how many birthdays you've had, this is it. There is a massive, life-altering difference between rigid certainty, looking at a situation and saying, oh, I already know exactly how this is going to end, and open curiosity, stepping back and saying, I wonder what I might discover here. Imagine visiting a brand new town. If you confidently expect to hate it before you've even parked your car, guess what? You're only going to notice the terrible traffic and the ugly buildings. But if you walk around with an open mind, you might just stumble upon this amazing hidden coffee shop and end up having a fantastic conversation with a local. Rigid thinking makes you struggle so much when life inevitably changes because you are spending all this energy trying to force reality to match your pre-existing expectations. You really have to transform the unknown into something genuinely worth exploring. Replacing that rigid certainty with simple, gentle curiosity drastically reduces your fear. It completely prevents that crushing frustration you feel when life inevitably decides to go off script. Curiosity doesn't demand that you succeed at every single new thing you try. It just asks that you stay open to the experience itself. Okay, now remember that promise I made you halfway through? It's time for the secret to consistency. Because knowing these 6 habits, that does not guarantee they'll be part of your life next month, let alone in 5 years. We have officially reached the most important part of this explainer. This is exactly what separates the folks who just get fired up for a few days from the ones who quietly, effectively transform their entire lives over the years. Here are your 2 actionable steps. Step 1, remember your why. Please don't just practice these habits because you generically want a healthier mind. Connect the habit to the specific, tangible life you want to be living in 5 years. Do you want to travel the world? Do you want to feel totally at ease in social settings? Anchor it to that. Step 2, make it ridiculously small. You have to shrink the action down so small that your brain literally can't say no to it. Want to build a learning habit? Give it just 5 minutes a day. Want to end the day on a positive note? Write down just one single sentence. Massive, life-changing transformations almost always begin with actions so small they seem completely insignificant at the time. And finally, I really want you to internalize this brilliant metaphor. Step off the trail, just step back on. Look, if you catch yourself slipping back into your old, comfortable habits, and you will, we all do not treat it like some catastrophic failure. Imagine you're walking on this gorgeous hiking trail in a national park. If you accidentally step off the path for a moment to look at a bird, you don't punish yourself by walking all the way back to your car at the very beginning of the park, right? No, you simply take a step back onto the trail. No guilt, no intense self-criticism, just one small step forward. Which brings us to our final and I think most powerful question for you today. What will you discover in your next 5 years? Because it's those tiny steps repeated over and over again that quietly become your future. You have the psychological tools right now to take active control of the narrative. The script for your next 5 years is completely blank. So tell me, what small experiment are you going to run today?